Hello, welcome to Reanimated episode 174. I'm Stuart. Joining me is H.A.
Hi.
Conrad. Hi, how's it going? How's New York?
Going well. New York's fantastic.
California's hot. Yeah. We had red flag warnings this weekend.
What does that mean?
That means there's a high chance of fire risk. Do you remember last, October?
Yeah,
we're
that
back.
was bad.
We're back. It's fire season. It's like hurricane season, except it's not as long. And
it feels long, though.
It does feel long, but hurricane season is kind of like from May to November.
Mm-hmm.
And here, fire season kind of just starts in, it's June, so it's not that different. And certainly we can burn in October. So there's a fire right now in Lake County that they're evacuating people for. Lake County is next door to Sonoma, where I am. So yeah. Hooray for Earth.
So is it mainly like fire strikes, like lightning strikes and stuff that would cause this when it's this dry?
There have been a lot. Actually, there have been a whole lot of vegetation fires recently, and there's very rarely lightning in this. I've never seen a thunderstorm here. So
it's man-made then?
It's almost always man-made. Yeah. In the case of the October fires, they found that
it was
we
the
had
gas company, right?
100 mile an hour winds were knocking trees into power lines, and that did it. So it's not that now. It's a lot of people throwing cigarettes out of their cars into like the grassy verge of the road or all kinds of stuff.
Did I ever tell you one time when Bill and we went to it was Yosemite, and it was Mariposa Grove, which is the place where they have a lot of the big trees, and we're walking through, and this guy was coming down, and he was smoking a freaking cigarette. There were like warnings everywhere around, and he threw it into the vegetation.
Wow.
And I went up and I stomped it out because I was just like, are you kidding me?
Did you address him in a New York fashion?
I did, and Bill was all, and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and kept going. But it was just like, really, I know that there are natural fires that happen, especially up in Yosemite, and that is somewhat of how some of those big trees, like their seeds and stuff, actually, that's how they are opened and things like that. Mm-hmm. But not like a freaking cigarette, man. Like, what are you doing? And there were multiple signs around. I mean, you should know anyway, but there were multiple signs around basically saying this is just absolutely forbidden. So anyway, people, I guess I just kind of question why you even want to walk around up there if that's what you're planning to do. But
yeah, well, some people just really love to smoke, and that's still legal for now.
And that's fine. That's fine. Just don't, be a jerk about it. That's all.
Don't be a jerk about it. Don't set everything on fire, please.
Yeah.
So anyway, fires. Anyway. That's my reality. What's the reality in Brooklyn? The unpleasant reality that you are currently experiencing.
This is sort of we've been having there's no unpleasant reality, so to speak. I mean, it's just been super, super humid. But that's part of it. But not nearly as I don't want to complain since I don't think we're anywhere near the heat index that you guys are suffering.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was 100 yesterday, 102, and my air conditioning wasn't working. So,
well, think about what it might be like
with
in a
humidity.
Zombie apocalypse,
yeah.
Without AC and all of that stuff, and with fires that you can't control. That would be interesting.
No, that would be terrible.
Of course it would, but I feel like they should explore this as a scenario.
You're right, they should. They kind of do with our two Walking Dead shows where they're constantly sweaty messes.
True, but they still look pretty good.
Yeah,
except for Daryl, who they try to make. I mean, he always looks good, but they make him look like dirtier and dirtier. And speaking of sweaty messes, let's talk about Nick this show. But you want to dive in? So yeah. Oh, we have one more thing to talk about before we dive in.
We have news.
Yes.
Staying on the theme of Walking Dead, Shane, somehow, this news dropped last week. John Bernthal's coming back to season 9.
Yes, somehow in between his Punisher dedication, the time he has to put into that show, he is going to be reappearing, and we've seen them do this before, so it will either be flashbacks or hallucinations. I'm betting on hallucinations, but
So
they decide.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I feel like this has to be tied in with Rick's sort of downward spiral, obviously, but he was a good Shane, but there's just no question about how this has to be, in someone's head.
Yeah. And we remember, of course, that Bernthal has come back and reprised Shane's character in other flashbacks already, or at least in one specific one in a shootout in Woodbury when Rick starts to see him after getting blown up or something. And in that scene, John Bernthal appeared with like a goatee. It was the Superman situation, the Superman mustache situation all over again. Where he came back and appeared with a goatee because he had to have a goatee for this other project he was working on, but they just went with it. They just they just were like, all right, fine, Shane has a goatee, even though he's like clean shaven in every scene that we've ever seen of him during his life. But then he morphs into the face of another guy that Rick, I think, summarily murders, or somebody does. So that was funny, but it's gonna be flashbacky. It's gonna be. If it's a flashback, it's going to be the two actors 9 years later acting like it was. I mean, they're good looking men. I'm sure they can pull it off. But
yes, but they have aged. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it.
No. They'll have to dye everybody's hair, but it's crazy. It's crazy to think that they're like, this seems like a good idea. Let sleeping Shane's lie. He's been put down twice already. Like, it's just, anyway, enough. Bernthal coming back. I want to be excited because I love this actor. I think he's great in everything, but it just seems like a real Hail Mary and then kind of an act of desperation. Like they're playing their
all of their cards,
their greatest hits at the concert. It's like, oh, okay, but your greatest hit actually was stabbed in the face. So let's just let that stop. Other things that are happening this week, there's a bunch of, the word zombie in headlines is now almost entirely about houses. It's really hard to find actual news.
There's one about a grilled cheese sandwich as well, which I'm not quite sure how that is like a zombie, but yes, that one keeps popping up, which I do find to be kind of funny anyway. Have you seen that one?
I have not. I don't know what a sandwich has to do with zombies.
There's some grilled cheese sandwich that they're calling zombies, and it's like the most delicious grill. And I'm like, what? How does this even make sense? So anyway.
Oh dear. But what we did find was a trailer for an upcoming film that's coming out in July. HA, I don't know if you noticed that.
I did.
On video on demand. It's called The Night Eats the World, and it appears to be a harrowing tale of zombie survival in Paris.
Right, but I also see a lot of imagery, even just in this trailer, from 28 Days Later. The roof specifically, where he's using all the things for the water catching. A little bit of the sort of scene with the... there's a scene with the security gate that I think is reminiscent. So, and in the trailer, they actually have a few people that have reviewed it, because I think this was in a film festival, but there's a part where there's a walker or whatever in a security gate that also reminds me of 28 Days Later. So I am very intrigued. I'm excited to see this.
Kind of came out of nowhere.
Right.
And but I'm happy to see it. It seems like the actor is American, but I've never seen him before.
I feel like I've seen that guy in stuff. I have to look this up because he looks quite familiar to me.
If anything, he reminds me of Pablo Schreiber. So it's a good trailer. I'd see it. It was like 2 parts viral, 2 parts 28 Days Later, and 1 part We'll Always Have Paris.
I guess I have not seen him because he is a Norwegian actor.
But he sounds so American. I mean, those Scandinavians.
He sounds American.
Sounds really American.
So, yeah. So I guess we will check him out. But he looks so much like somebody else. So who knows? But I'm excited to see this. I think we should definitely review it.
Yeah, awesome. July, coming soon.
All
I
right.
guess that means we have to talk about Fear the Walking Dead season 3,
Oh,
episodes 3 and
yes.
4, which are Good Out Here and
Yep.
Buried. Good Out Here, and I'm amazed. It is July, end of July, last week in July, and you
Mm-hmm.
managed to not get hit with the spoilers about what happened in this episode.
Nope. I avoided it, and I'll admit I definitely had an inkling because of, The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead and what they choose to do when a character is about to bite it. And spoiler alert, we'll be talking about that. But I was really convinced that they were not going to I was convinced that that's not what they were going to do. I thought it was a little bit of a bait and switch that it would be. I actually thought it was going to be Luciana, that they were all focused on Nick because it would be Luciana. I was wrong.
Huh.
And admittedly, I just kept being like, "Oh, is this just like him in his head?" But no, no. So big news: Nick is dead. And I'll admit, I'm bummed out.
Okay. I mean, he has been one of the more interesting characters, but he's also, yeah, unfortunately they make him more interesting at the beginning of this season by giving him a conscience
Yeah.
and giving him like a little PTSD. It As long as it doesn't go too long, I'm fine with the little bit of the I can't leave the wire sort of thing. I mean, I feel like that's pretty relatable. I think a lot of people would be challenged to go out into zombie land.
Yep.
Whereas, you've got your scouts, you got your people like Jesus who go out and are pretty comfortable out there. I'm sure, for every one of them, there's probably 10 people in the hilltop who don't want to ever go outside the walls. And Nick kind of turns into one of those people at the baseball stadium.
Right, and I mean, I guess yes, there have certainly been points during the series where this character has annoyed me, and the things that they have done with him have annoyed me. But the things that I have liked, and I think that in terms of the acting and the cast, I think that Nick is one of the stronger characters.
Yeah.
So this is played by Frank Delane, and so I feel like the actor himself has brought a lot to this character and kind of it has been able to turn things in a way that maybe was even better than what the writing was, because a lot of the times they would give this actor a lot of clunkers to deal with and a lot of stupid things to deal with, and specifically his relationship with his mom, I think especially in this new season, has been an interesting thing to see that development. So
It's gone
like,
back to like a normal mother-son relationship instead
yeah,
of the weird hyper-sexualized version of it that we had
which
the
was
season
creepy.
before. It was super
Which was
creepy.
really creepy.
Yeah.
So I was kind of looking forward to seeing what would happen. I kind of thought that they were creating him, building him to be a leader that was going to take over this group, as we often have seen with these characters that will sort of take themselves out of everything. And, that definitely, especially where they were showing his synergies with Morgan, I thought that that's where this was going to go, sort of like a teacher-student Padawan situation, and that is not what happened.
Sure. I mean, that was a good thing that they did in this episode was
Right.
they gave you like a peek ahead of at that relationship, and that could have gone somewhere pretty cool. But with Nick's character, it was always interesting the way he would get taken under the wings of like all the leaders of the various groups that they encountered, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill. He also was annoying in that he would like ran away from his family group in Mexico at one point and just kind of, but that was never really explained why he decided to just go off by himself. The whole junkie thing with his character was also an interesting challenge to get past in the first and second and most of the first season, and then he had that relapse in season 3. But it was overall he was a good character, and he had I think he was well written as well, mostly except for some of the decisions, and then really well performed. So it's a shame for the franchise, but Frank Delane had asked at the end of season 3 or during season 3 to get off the show. And
And I'm hoping this means that we will see him in other really cool projects, because I really like him as an actor. So I think that at least he told them that, and I do feel like his send-off was very good and definitely can build the rest of, like, obviously it's going to inform what happens for the remainder of the season. And but it was definite. I'm shocked that I was able to not see the spoiler. So
Yeah.
it was appropriately shocking.
Here's a piece of advice for you. Continue to keep your head down because we have more episodes to go.
Okay.
So this episode is frustrating with the flashback, flash forward stuff that goes on.
I would say that this continues to be a frustration of mine with how they're running the season, as we talked about in our last review. I think this is a very sloppy and cheap way to show things that are happening, and if used properly, it can certainly fill in and explain certain things and build some tension, but they are absolutely overusing this. And this being the second time that you have now watched this, what is your take on it?
Well, between this and the new mechanic of using Al's camera as like an alternate perspective, it's tiresome, and I'm like trying to keep track of flashing back, flashing forward, flashing back, flashing forward. So the flashbacks are hopeful, like because the flash forwards are washed out and there's no color in basically
like
in
very
this world.
Desaturated and neutral looking. Yep.
Yeah, and the flashbacks are brighter, and they mostly have Madison in them, and she is very absent in the flash forwards, and so we're like, where the hell is she? Can she show up and give these guys some sort of leadership? In the flash forwards, Alicia, Strand, Lucy, and Nick are just jerks. I think Lucy is the only one of them who isn't a jerk all the time, and that's really frustrating. So I mean, it's not that. Yeah, I'm also not a fan of the flashing back, flashing forward, because it is a really miserly way to tease out a story, in my opinion. If you've got a good story, just tell it.
Right. You don't need to use this. Like, it's stupid.
To me, it's this Scott Gimple approach of don't tell them what happened. I'm like, actually, that's why we're here. If you're not telling me what's happened, I am literally going to lose interest.
Right, and there is something to be said for building. If you can't build those characters in a way, in a linear, like, storytelling way, then there's a problem. So this worries me a little bit about what the rest of the season holds. Obviously, you know a little bit more than me. I also take issue with the whole Al thing and the video diaries being her main motivation. It doesn't, like, I don't even really care what has happened to her or what her secret little stories are that she's doing this that motivates her. I don't buy it as a credible reason for doing the things that she's done, for pulling that van out, for, you know, basically holding these guys hostage just so she can get their stories. I just don't buy this at all. And I find it to also be a very, like, kind of like lame way of motivating her character. And I do think that, you know, what it actually reminds me a little bit of, did you ever see Blair Witch Project?
Yeah, of course.
So it's the sort of unbelievable storyline where even if you're in the woods getting attacked by some weird backwoods witch or hillbilly or whatever it happened to be, you're still going to be carrying around this camera and, like, trying to tell that story, like, because it makes you feel safe. Like, it's that stupid explanation. And what?
Yeah, I like that. I like that explanation. Like, this is the only way I can handle the reality right now. It's not that, obviously. That's not. It's not
quite that, but it is sort of along those lines, and that was all I could think about while watching.
They've really leaned into her mission, and when you look at the three of like the quote unquote good guys, Al, John Dory, and Morgan Freeman? No, what's his last name? Morgan Gibson? Morgan.
Just Morgan.
He does have a last name. So when you look at them, they are like the last three altruists in the zombie apocalypse, it almost seems like. With John, who's just like on a mission of love, which what? In the zombie apocalypse? And he's like this bizarre cartoon character, and he's way too nice. That's great. Morgan, who is really closed down, but still he's like, I don't kill, and, you know, if you stay with me long enough, I'll start giving you some advice about life. and then Al, who's, I don't know if she's holding them hostage. I think that they've agreed to come along. The thing is, okay, so we've also got in this storyline in the flash forward, they're going back and forth constantly over who has control.
Right.
So yeah, we had the initial ambush, and then the people who used to be the heroes of the show, who are now like the villains, take over the SWAT truck, and then there's a fight back on the SWAT truck, and they go into the ditch, and now it's the other people who have the upper hand. But their version of having the upper hand is just like, we're just gonna zip tie you one of you just because we don't trust Nick, but the rest of you guys, let's do whatever we have to do. They're unbelievably nice in the zombie apocalypse.
Yep. And look, we've seen bad, and we've seen, some of the worst behavior on all of these shows, and so this just feels a little unbelievable to me. But I don't know. I just the whole back and forth, even Al getting out of her cuffs and causing the big accident that was sort of the reason that the group splits up seemed unbelievable to me. And it was a way to separate the group, to have some Morgan Nick time, and then to also also have the Al, Lucy, Alicia, and Strand time. And that was, I guess, helpful, and it is good to see Nick with Morgan and see that, ultimately we've seen how Nick can glom on to specific characters who have strong leadership or strong, he likes to be a follower in some way, and so you start to see this play out with Morgan a little bit.
Yeah, you've also never seen him really be not have the upper hand some way, and watching Morgan just knock him on his ass is really nice.
Yeah, that's good.
I enjoyed that.
And like the other pieces here, we see a lot more of Naomi in these two episodes. Well, I guess in both of these episodes, in flashbacks, and there are some definitely cool scenes that happen. The water park scene is kind of interesting in the way that they handle how they show the walkers in the water. And then there's also, I kind of feel like the walker special effects people were like, okay, we're going to do water park zombies and we're going to do cactus zombies. Kind of set pieces with the walkers, special set pieces where we see them have specific attributes because they're in a certain location.
Right.
So one being the water park and one being the cactus farm or whatever that thing is. So those things were kind of interesting, only just because you can absolutely imagine the makeup team being like, okay, this would be great. And it made for an interesting fights and things like that.
That's the Nicotero effect. I mean, that's what that's something.
That's what he lives for.
Throws things in. The first episode, though, the episode 3, Good Out Here, is mostly, I think, the flashbacks anyway are about this trip to this church where they find out that Charlie and Ennis have been listening to their radio broadcasts and going ahead of them and cleaning stuff out if they haven't already cleaned it out. And
and what I want to say about that is, wouldn't they know? They already know that these people are super sneaky and terrible. Wouldn't you be a little bit more, I don't know.
Well, when you combine the moral of this episode and the following one, what the showrunners really want us to think is that having any shred of decency is basically a liability in this world.
Right.
And I'm really tired of this being their only message.
Their theme.
I mean, at the end of season 8 of The Walking Dead Prime, I feel like we're about to get away from that. The last few scenes, we haven't talked about it, you and I, yet, but the last few scenes of that season are positive, and it's about people working together. I'm sure they'll find a way to make that a liability again. But I'm so tired of this insistence on the part of the show, because this group of bad guys, the Vultures, only work if your group is nice and will not strike first. The second episode that we watched today, where they're like, we tried to be better people, and that's why everything bad has happened to us, and that's why Nick's dead. It's like, but this is insane. This is insane that the show is forcing this narrative where the Vultures show up. The Vultures are clearly trying to kill off everybody in the Diamond through it's passive aggressive, but it's actually not. It's just aggressive. Like going through and hearing their comms and stealing food is an act of war, I think, between two groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are completely justified in killing them all. They have 48 people inside the diamond and lots of guns. You don't see that many of the scavengers, and they should just be killing them. I mean, maybe they'll be harder to live with themselves, but that's the only way for this to work. And I feel like it's a little bit too much like skipping through a field of flowers, to steal some imagery from this episode. And it does seem naive, but it doesn't fly very well with our knowledge of how Madison has been at all. I mean, I know she's trying to like be a better version of herself, but doesn't it strike you as incongruous and just like it doesn't work?
The reason why it strikes me as incongruous is that I can buy that she might be trying to be a better person, but threaten the people that she cares about and loves. I think that veneer or that particular philosophy is going to fall away very quickly. Yeah. I don't believe that she's going to be looking out at things with rose-colored glasses and just kind of being like, oh, we'll just, and maybe it isn't killing them. Maybe it's like kind of taking them hostage and just kind of doing, they could have easily overpowered this group. And, if they wanted, there are many ways that they could have handled this instead of just kind of letting them hang out by the gates.
Yep.
They have many more people. Tactically, she and Strand are very good at coming up with plans. So I just don't buy this little helplessness thing that happens to them. And, in terms of how this story, it just feels a little too convenient. And so I'm sitting there watching this in just almost complete disbelief that this is how things would happen, because I just don't, it does not seem plausible at all with all the things that we know about Madison and her group. We're talking about the group that took out the main leader of the ranch with no issue. Maybe a little bit of a struggle, but really when it came down to it and came down to survival, that's what they did. Yeah. And that's why I'm just having a hard time swallowing what they're dishing out with this episode. Haha.
Yeah, it is difficult to consider, and I think it's an overreach on the part of the showrunners and it's exhausting to me to have to think like, oh, you're being good is a liability always in the Walking Dead world. And I guess they have characters who are trying to disprove that. We've got our Morgans and our John Dorys and our Altheas, who is a little more practical than naive. But with them, we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, there's no way that those guys are going to make it because they
idealistic.
They overbalance. It's Anyway, so this episode, the flashbacks that mostly deal with Nick like realizing that he is still a killer inside by wanting to kill Ennis after he. Like the thing that throws him over the edge is like, at least I can still provide food for my people, and that like throws Nick into a murderous rage. You're like, wow, okay, that was actually pretty easy. You might want to have that looked at. Do.
And also the other piece of the story that just kept kind of I kept coming back to, like, I don't know that this is how they would have felt, is the whole thing about the kid, about Charlie, and how upset they are that she has chosen this group and would betray them. And they have this idea that they're going to rehabilitate her or make her see the light or that kind of thing. I just don't feel like they had enough time with this kid to really feel that way. And yeah, you can be angry and upset about how these things turned out and that she turned out to be the mole. But I just don't see them basically putting their group at risk for her or really caring enough about all of this, to put everything at risk. Like maybe if they can deal with it as if they think she's being held hostage or if they feel like something strange is going on with her, like it would be different if she was, say, being abused, right? I could maybe believe that a little bit more than what they seem to be trending with this story here, with this storyline with her. But that just doesn't really land to me as a true motivator in the way that they presented it.
Yeah.
I could see them being a little bit more desperate if there was something specific that they saw happening with her, where this group was treating her poorly, rather than her just being the person that keeps betraying them.
Well, she's cute. She's a cute kid. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't know
I
that's
don't
enough.
see what the all the fuss is about. And also, I'm sure that tweens are really rare in the zombie apocalypse. So in the flash forwards, there are a lot of things going on. There's probably way more moving parts than just the trying to find the supplies and getting outrun. But one of the conversations that happens that's pretty short and you might have missed it was John Dory asking Luciana, so why does Nick keep saying make sure she comes back? And they're like, okay, I will. And she shares a little bit about like, yeah, one time I didn't come back. And John, this ties nicely into his quest because he's like, so did you leave because you didn't love? And she's like, no, I left, but I still loved. But that's the extent of our description of her backstory, and still nothing about how she found them again.
Nope.
So
still a mystery.
Very confused still. But it's nice that they managed to use Lucy to give John Dory some gas to keep moving on his quest of love in the zombie apocalypse, which is absurd, but it's still nice because it's positive.
For a little while, anyway.
We got Morgan and Nick running into Ennis in town, and Ennis is just a dick to everybody.
Uh-huh.
Like, this guy, what does Charlie see in him?
Right, and it's all a little bit mustache twirly to an extent that, again, it's a little bit like, when we saw like the saviors and the wolves and all that thing. It seems almost a little too evil to be believed that people would be this crazy and sadistic. But it's though mainly what Ennis does is like rub peanut butter in their faces or like scavenging like supplies in their faces. I know he does a little bit more than that, but it just is kind of like, why would you even care what this dude says, right? I don't know. Like his whole comment and his sort of like Nick baiting just seems a little bit over the top.
The thing that's over the top is that he's completely unconcerned about his welfare. Like he tells Morgan, who is limping, he's like, keep walking, old man, nothing here for you. And then Nick, he actually baits him to attack him. But then is not ready for him when Nick inevitably attacks him. And this is a guy who's already held a knife to his throat and started to slice it.
Yep.
And yet Ennis is just like, yeah, I'm just going to say some things about you that will definitely make you murderous, and then turn around and go on and like sort my persimmons or whatever it is he's doing. So that's insane and doesn't really work.
Especially for somebody who's clearly survived this long, doesn't make a ton of sense. Yeah. I feel like he would at least have some survival instincts.
Right.
To know that this might be a bad idea.
Yeah. And somehow young Charlie is around during all of this, which is probably unfolds over 5 minutes of like actual chronological time in the show. Mm-hmm. But she must hear these voices and the commotion. And then even the truck pulls up, which, by the way, they show Morgan listening and hear the truck. And I feel like the truck is probably still like a mile away based on how long it takes the rest of the group to meet up with them. So, yeah, that truck is, talk about liabilities. That thing must be pulling zombies from everywhere, even when the horn isn't just going,
Just randomly going off, Well, and that's another interesting question because we don't really see any reason why Charlie would be so loyal to them. So, you may know a little bit more than me about this at this point, but I don't really understand the motivation for her even carrying that Ennis is dead. She seems to kind of be concerned about survival and all that kind of thing. So you would imagine that instead of killing Nick, she would throw herself at the group's mercy for survival purposes.
Ooh, that's a good point. Ennis does say that he found her originally in the wilderness. That's maybe, one thing that gets... Still. So if there's a connection there and, young people can form those kinds of bonds more easily.
Maybe.
But yeah, ultimately, Nick murders Ennis in a pretty gruesome way with antlers, and then slowly pushes him onto them. And Morgan basically let it happen. Like he didn't, because when Nick is forcing him into it and Morgan's blocking his way, he's like, "Are you willing to do what it's going to take to stop me?" And Morgan, let me explain to you: you don't have to murder him to stop him from killing Ennis.
That's all he says.
You just have to beat him up, and make it impossible for him again, like which you showed you could do earlier.
Just knock him down. He's not.
Yeah, it's a little lame that he let it happen. And I'm sure that, if the Morgan that we know is going to be beating himself up about this for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's
he already
curious.
is.
Yes.
We've seen the mournful Morgan again.
And then, though, he's also talked a little bit about Eastman, which was, honestly, I was watching this, and he's like, so I met a man, and he didn't have to help me, but he did. I was like, oh, he's talking about Rick. And then he's like, and he taught me Aikido, and like, or whatever, however it comes out. Like, oh, wait, that's right.
Yep.
Rick is not actually part of Morgan's life philosophy. Rick is the reason that he is not in Alexandria. So,
right.
So I thought that was interesting also. And then Nick sits down on a box looking at a flower and reading the I Ching. I think it's not the I Ching. Whatever the book is for the Aikido, the Way of Peace. And next thing you know, we're having some pretty good crying going on from Alicia Debenham Carey, who plays Alicia on the show. Did you like her crying? I thought her crying was pretty persuasive. It was good sobbing.
I thought her crying was good, and I have to say, like, look, everything else aside, this cast has been together a while. He's one of the original cast members.
Yep.
This has to be a hard thing to deal with. It's got to be sad. I mean, it seems like they all get along pretty well. Who knows what the reality is?
If you're actually trying to say that her emotional acting came from the fact that she's not going to work with him anymore, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that this show is made up of flashbacks. So even though Frank Delane was like, I quit, I'm pretty sure they kept him working for the rest of the shooting season.
Oh, well, that's an interesting take.
It just undermines the
theory.
It also
all right, fair.
It undermines the importance of killing him off. I don't know, like
right.
That's why we get to keep him around, just like John Bernthal 9 years later.
Oh man, it must have been like when they told the actor, it's like, okay, we'll get you off the show, but you're gonna
have to work for it.
That's interesting, huh?
Yeah. Like, why couldn't they have just killed him off on the dam at the end of season 3? Be like, oh, you want off the
that's
show?
kind of...
Okay, sure, blow up the dam and yourself, because that's what he was.
That would have been an easy way out, right?
Pretty easy,
yeah.
And that would have that could have the loss of one of her children could have explained Madison's pivot into being a nice person. She's
Agreed.
like, I already lost one
man.
child. I'm not going to lose another through violence, Like, hey, guys, I just figured out a great way for you to explain your... Oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's wait.
If only they had listened to you, Stuart.
Nobody listens to me. Just like Eric Kane from Forbes, who wants to write his own original zombie show for Netflix.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the end of Good Out Here. Clearly, Nick wasn't. He was not okay. Outside, or back in the, what's this one called? Buried. Mm-hmm. They're sad in the van. That's where we start off. Sad in the van.
Yes. And
we're doing interviews with Althea.
And what's really, what I was just sort of, like, everything related to this Althea character, which I just keep reminding myself how much I hated the Maggie Grace character on Lost. I was willing to give this a little bit of a shot. I wasn't sure where they were going with the whole video diary thing and that whole thing. And now I am like, I don't know, like, so much of what goes on between her and the other characters is like, tell me your story, tell me the truth. And they're like, no, I don't want to tell you my story. And then they kind of tell her their story.
Yeah.
And then, it's just like, this is just kind of a lame, to me, just a ridiculously lame motivator and storyline.
At the end of this episode, after they haven't been going to a place to bury Nick for like a 4-hour drive or whatever, however long it took, and it's really a weapons cache. She's like,
yes,
you told me you were going to tell me your stories, and they clearly have been. They've been telling her a really long, boring story from my perspective,
flashbacky stories,
which apparently includes like them recalling dialogue from other characters, because then sometimes they'll flash to Althea and she's like, why did he say that or something? Mm-hmm. And you're like, wait, they're telling you the dialogue in their annoying ass long story?
Right.
I had a bit of a moment when that happened.
Me too. Like, I felt the same way.
I don't believe your story now because we're not even coming to bury Nick. I'm like, wait, who cares, man? Their stories were bad, and why are you surprised? It's quite frustrating.
Agreed.
Anyway, so we get some shots of like Lucy, who's doing the coup de grace on dead Nick. Alicia takes out zombie Ennis, with like this insanely long backswing on her. We get the backstory also on her weapon, which is the muzzle off of a Browning machine gun, 30 caliber machine gun. It's a World War II gun that I feel like we've seen also in the last season of Walking Dead.
Yeah, they seem really excited to use this.
They're really into these
like,
old ass machine guns. Like,
they're like, what's happening here?
These are museum guns, guys. They're not going to be
how
everywhere.
are so many of them out in the wild? I don't know.
Yeah, but okay. And so here's a point also at the beginning close to the beginning of this episode where Althea's in the van and she's like, Strand, just tell me your story. And he's like, that's a big question. I can't do. Or how did you get here? And he's like, he's incapable of telling a story. And that kind of, that's more of this Gimple teasing it out BS that I'm not okay with. When I can see it happening, it's even worse. I'm just like, you know how easy it is to tell a straightforward story. He's like, well, I was in Los Angeles when this family saved me. We went to Mexico. Then we went to Texas. Then we went back to Mexico.
Maybe he's channeling Scott Gimple in this, in that he can't tell a story.
He is. I mean, 100%. It's just, but I'm like, I can tell your story because I feel like I've seen most of it except for this season where you're teasing it out in flashbacks. But I can tell like 90% of your story, Strand, and it's mostly like.
But it's also like I'm not going to tell you my story. Then proceed to tell you the story in the most inane way possible.
The story that they tell, and Lucy starts it with, "There was one day when we could have stopped all of this from happening." But then
tell me about that day.
That story begins after the vultures have already been there. So I'm like, no, the day when you could have stopped all this from happening was literally shooting them all when they pulled up outside your base.
Yep, that was the day.
That was that day. Not this whatever day of like we went on missions.
And guess what? It doesn't need to take you like however long this episode was, which felt a lot longer than 45 minutes, by the way.
Yeah.
Just because it just teased out and didn't give you a ton of information. And the story is that if they had left, then none of this would have happened. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's also other very easy solutions to this problem.
I feel like it's the elephant in the room is the not leaving, it's the killing the vultures who are killing you. But yes, instead we get treated to these three three flashbacks. It's Jenna Elfman and Alicia Debnam Carey going to the water park. It's Nick and Lucy going to a library, and it's Strand and his love interest, whose name I have no idea what it is, going.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Because that's how important it is.
Cactus nursery.
Yep.
And what do you think of this like matchmaking that they're doing with Strand?
I think you're gonna have to have I think that it makes a little bit of sense to have this idea there, but I just don't. It felt a little. I don't really feel like there's any chemistry between him and this character at this point. So I don't. I know that they mentioned it in the first one of the first episodes, but I just wasn't really feeling it at all. I don't think that he would really care what that guy thought.
The dude seems a little old to be as like puppy dog eyes at Strand as he is. I mean, he's obviously into him, and he's like everything. Like maybe I don't know if it's this dialogue or whatever the script, but he just is like, oh, I want to hang out with you, Strand. You're like, I'm like, what are you, 15? The dude looks like he's 30 something.
Yep. And even when so I will admit, even when they were implying this on their run, I'm like, wait. Why does he really oh yeah, this is a love interest guy. Like, it took me a minute to realize that was where it was going, because I just don't feel like these two actors or the characters have chemistry together to make that believable enough. And I also feel like it was just in terms of Strand showing somebody something, I just don't believe that he would show his escape route to this guy.
Other stuff with Strand in this episode. Do you know why he carries that rock around, or what happened to his hand? He has like a scar on his hand that Althea draws attention to.
Yeah, wasn't it the fire and his the rock wasn't the rock from when the Colonial or from the hacienda, wherever they were?
I have no idea. I honestly, I could have used some flashbacks to an earlier season
to show at least that.
But they're not going back. I feel like they've really turned a leaf on this show. They don't show us stuff that happened before, other than these kind of weird references to rocks and scars that I don't remember where he got them. It certainly wasn't in season 3. Or maybe it's from the dam. Did he get shot by Daniel? I don't remember if he got hurt. Daniel definitely got shot in the face, but I don't remember if Strand also got hurt. It's a little bit weird that they are kind of referring to things that happened in the past seasons, but they're not spending any time on it, and they kind of expect us as the audience to do all the legwork in terms of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. So Lucy left and she didn't come back, and Strand has a rock that reminds him to be a good person, but clearly that rock has not been holding up its end of the bargain because he has packed a vehicle.
That rock isn't working.
Get a new rock, man. Maybe something a little bigger, because I would lose that rock. The only upside to the Strand story is to show that he is still a calculating, devious person. But they've honestly kind of cut his balls off in this season so far. He has much less personality.
He's not quite the operator that we've seen in the other seasons.
Not even close.
I do like to see. I have liked how bonded he and Madison are. But I just think that it's a little bit weird that he's so muted in this. So he's
just basically following Alicia, and he's just like he has some one-liners that he throws out every here and there, and he's kind of giving John Dory a hard time when they reveal that his lady love might be dead, which seems a little bit cold even for Strand.
Mm-hmm.
But because
he's just like, oh,
there's no upside.
Yeah, I know that was pretty rude. That whole thing.
He's like, see, your story does end with death. Like, dude, just chill. The guy has lots of guns, and he's obviously way better at shooting than you ever were.
Well, even Luciana's sort of dropping that on poor John Dory. It's like, okay, so clearly he recognizes the bag. You get that this might be something that could be important to him, and you're just being, after losing Nick, you're just saying like, oh, she's dead. Like, kind of like, I just don't, this seems a little weird to me.
Well, they are trying to recruit him to come and fight the vultures with them, or at least that's what it turns into.
True, but then wouldn't you want to get him to sympathize a little bit more with you by being...
Not a dick.
Yeah.
Strand has never been a good negotiator. Oh, wait. Yes, he actually talked a guy into killing himself once, I think. So, fine. Revisionist show writing. Strand, I feel like, is not being dealt with very well in this season. So his story involves cactus zombies and trying to talk to this love interest, and then deciding that he wants to impress him or help the group instead of himself. Like, very un-Strand-like. Nick and Lucy go to a library and find an atlas and a sad story about a zombie who cut his wrists. And the water slide is pretty dumb.
It's totally dumb, but you can tell they had fun doing it.
I was looking for some Scott Gimple living diorama type scenery dressing, like we've talked about in multiple times with the Walking Dead Prime. This is a great setup for show me how this community worked and failed, and I didn't get any of that.
Yep. I
mean, they had walls.
Mm-hmm.
But the place is, maybe it fell a long time ago, and there's nothing to explain how it didn't work out. But they are so eager to get into the water. I don't understand why it goes that direction. Why they're more willing to try and climb up this slide that's coated in stuff, and they have to go through a pool of zombies to get to it instead of just dismantling the barricade on the stairs.
Yeah, I don't know. It was not a smart tactical plan on their end, but it did allow eventually Alicia to get her a cool weapon, I suppose. I
guess, and as well as a machine gun and a big box of medical supplies. Naomi, or the Laura Naomi character, I think is pretty interesting. She's obviously conflicted. She's constantly trying to run away, which I like. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't want to be around you guys. You're doomed. And I'm like, yes, okay. Finally, somebody who's kind of got their eyes wide open.
Yeah, except, she has this whole conversation. Alicia agrees with her and then takes it back, basically, when it comes down to it before telling Madison. Mm-hmm. That kind of seems stupid to me. Because I also feel like Naomi would have no problem telling Madison.
Well, at the end, she does say, if this place is going to make it, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Still seemed kind of like a lame thing.
It is a lame thing. Either way, yeah, I think I'm probably just being too negative about this episode, but I did not enjoy all of the like. I tried to be a better person. That's why Nick is dead. My brother is dead. My friend is dead. All this stuff. It just felt like a hammer over the head.
Yeah, it's stupid.
And I find that entire push too depressing, and it's been done to death in the other show, and I feel like I don't need more of that. This show kept itself out of that morality argument, I feel like. Mm-hmm. I mean, Travis was basically too good, but then he also went out like a super boss. Mm-hmm. There haven't been any of these characters who are too good for this earth in this show, you know?
Right.
So I don't want them to bring that over, and yet it seems like it's too late already.
It does, and again, the storytelling mechanism, what they're doing here is just ridiculous. So I kind of feel like, I mean, there's obviously reason, like they're just trying to like tease it out. It's Gimple, true Gimple characterizations, and I just think it really shows how weak, at least in my mind, the plot line is in this particular season so far. And so I know you've seen more, and I hope that they'll turn it around, but I fear that this is going to kind of be the trend for the show.
Yeah, it does seem that way. So by the end of the show, we've got another shift in the like the alliances with Alicia, Strand, and Lucy joining up with Al and getting in the SWAT truck and driving away. John Dory is like reeling after finding out that his lady love is or might be dead. Instead of, I don't know, and Morgan stays with him just to like be a good dude. But they've also talked about him, how he's gonna just like keep going on his own way.
Right. But I just circle back for one moment in terms of them conveying that she's dead to John Dory. Mm-hmm. Not one of them says they saw her die. They just say she didn't make it out of the stadium. So, like, there's that. Right. And you would think if it was that important to him that they would give him some details, or if they didn't actually see her die, they could say, hey, she didn't make it out with us, but we don't know what happened. Yep. Right? Like, and they don't do any of that. So they're leaving that obvious, like, clunker right there. But it is an interesting way to separate out the characters and the philosophies, because basically John Dory and Morgan are definitely a little bit more in sync in terms of what they think and how they are dealing with this world, versus Al and Alicia, Lucy, and Strand. So they're, at least, I mean, Al in some way clearly wants to, like, she just wants their stories, but she's also doesn't have a problem helping them getting where they're going.
Yeah.
So
Al does have some interesting practical sides to her, as well as her weird, like, idealistic mission of journalism with a capital J.
And of course, something's going to be unveiled about her little videos that she freaks out about from the bog, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
So that will be, I'm sure, revealed later.
It will be, I'm sure, revealed later. But yeah, so I'm not really trying very hard, apparently, not to be too negative, but I was surprised to have Nick killed off in episode 3 of this season. I feel like it's an odd place to lose a major character, but they shouldn't have to wait for like season finales to do that kind of thing.
Right, but as you pointed out, like they bring him back for so many flashbacks that it seems kind of strange that they would make that decision.
Yeah.
At this point, since they clearly were able to to have him for most of the season. Also strange in that the burial place where they were going to bury Nick, Morgan's like, he likes living things, but yet they bury him beneath this somewhat dead-looking tree. So
I thought it was a cool tree. It looked like a cool tree. Like,
it looked cool, but it looked like it was on its way out. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, it probably isn't. Doesn't have long to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were just going to bury him in the hole where they had the guns.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Nice, Alicia.
Yeah, and again, I just don't buy that from Alicia and Lucy. So, also feeling a little strange about that. But yeah, so I guess we can talk about the next 2 episodes next time, unless you have other things to add.
No, not really. I guess, one last thing to mention is just the dynamic between our Strand, Lucy, and Alicia survivors. They're all new versions of themselves in this season. Like we've said, Strand is kind of some of his agency has been stripped from him. I think Lucy's has also, Although
Yep.
we already saw that at Brokejaw. She was like a stranger in a strange land.
Yep.
At the Colonia, she ran their scouts. Like, she was a leader.
Yep.
She's a badass who's also a leader. Alicia
And-
has also grown into that season after season, but she's still basically a high school student. At this point, she's a high school dropout because, well, her school got eaten. And she's been given these like superpowers, like calculating the amount of oxygen in a room. And what other like amazing thing was she able to do with her mind? She's like a super person, and now she's kind of become the de facto leader of this group.
Right, and I agree. Like, I'm troubled by that, just given how strong Lucy was made to be when we first saw her. And it's not saying that she couldn't be sort of transformed a little bit, but I just don't buy that in these scenarios when we're looking at things like her significant other is killed off. She's dealing with adversity from every side, that she wouldn't still retain some of those skills and that leadership and authority that we saw before.
Yeah.
So that's a little troubling.
I think it's a little bit of a bummer that we don't have a leader, Lucy. But maybe those two characters have to be muted to let Alicia play a lead role. Or maybe we're supposed to believe that they're
sad?
like
Isn't that a little bit sad, especially from a diversity point of view, too? Like, we see Lucy dealing with drug dealers and multiple factions and keeping this medical thing, like, keeping people safe, sending out scouts, dealing with politics, all of that stuff that is much more complicated than the particular situations we're finding them in now that deal with smaller players and definitely, in my mind, small potatoes compared to what she was dealing with before.
Yeah.
Whereas Alicia's a freaking teenager. So I don't know. I just don't. It bothers me.
Yeah, we have to kind of just put all that aside. But it's hard to, because we've seen the rest of the show, but it's like the showrunners haven't. So that's a bummer. But next time, we're going to be super pumped to talk about episodes 5 and 6. Right?
Okay.
Wait, what are those? Those are Laura and Just in Case. The episode called Laura is a good one. I enjoyed that.
Okay.
So-
Well, I look forward to now getting into it. I'll try not to spoil myself.
Yeah.
Well, if you have thoughts about Fear the Walking Dead episodes 3 and 4, or about the season in general, feel free to leave us a line on our website, reanimatedpodcast.com. Send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or tweet at us at reanimatedpcast. And until next time, ciao. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.